All right, welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got Billy Embody from On the Pony Express with us, chatting a little bit about one of the bigger games in the ACC this weekend, Pitt and SMU. But Billy, let's rewind just a little bit. Survived that Duke game. Um, is what's the concern level maybe coming out of that?
Yeah, the concern level is that an anomaly from Kevin Jennings of all the turnovers that happened on that offense from him, or is he going to get back to playing the way Kevin Jennings has played for much of his time as a starter, which is taking care of the football, making explosive plays both through the passing game and on the ground, and directing an offense that is normally among the best in the league, and that's what we're going to wait and see on. But I'll say this: what I've seen from Kevin over his couple of years at SMU, what I've seen from him this season, he's a guy that should be able to manage his emotions a little bit better. I think he felt a lot of pressure to do everything himself, to make up for RJ Maryland being out for the season and Jake Bailey being lost right before halftime. And he started making some plays that were just not the general plays that he makes. And credit Duke, they game planned really well. His first interception down the seam, I think it was his first one, was a perfectly scouted play that SMU had worked and done well with throughout the season a lot with Kevin. And so they were there. He threw it into double coverage. Can't make that decision. But I think you got to credit Duke's defense a little bit. But against Pitt, we're going to see now a defense that is coming off of a game where they had 3 pick sixes. They swarmed. They got after Kyle McCord. They did all those things. We've got to see if SMU can bounce back and play the brand of football that they've done for much of the year. And in particular, they're very good at home. They just do a good job of being ready to go. So that's what I'm watching because defensively, SMU just continues to be one of the best defenses in the entire country.
Yeah, Duke had some chances. And in fact, Lashley sounded almost apologetic that they won the game. It was kind of a weird. His post. I told you this last time you were on. I told you this at ACC kickoff. Like he's just so real, and you know a lot of times you get pretty real emotions. I feel like he doesn't excel at the coach speak BS that most coaches are so profound and so good in. But Duke getting 6 turnovers and then really not scoring. I guess they had a touchdown after one, but they drove for over 60 yards. So I don't know if that's really considered points off a turnover. So, man, SMU though made the plays when they had to, whether it was blocking a field goal or stopping on a 2-point conversion, which I think was the right call. Like, I guess for every bit of concern that there's a little bit of pride in the fact that they held up when they had to and they escaped and found a way.
Yeah, exactly. And that was after 3 straight road games now, SMU coming away with 3 wins, and they have the longest active streak of road wins in the country, tied with Texas on that front. So they are a team that is now battle tested, and we knew that kind of going through the BYU, TCU, Florida State. All those were in Dallas. All those were 2 of the 3 were kind of manageable games. This has turned into quite the teeth of the schedule for SMU, even though they jumped all over Stanford. The Duke game was one where there's so much familiarity between these coaching staffs, so much want to win and be able to beat your friends, between Manny Diaz and Rhett Lashley. And for them to get out of there with a 1-point win, especially considering all the things that went wrong, they're only the second team in 125 games now, or 126, to lose the turnover battle by 6 and win the game. So the other one was 2011. I believe it was Marshall beat Memphis or Memphis beat Marshall, but that is just a wild stat. And on top of that, the defense to give up 0 points off turnovers is special. They got somehow to overtime. That blocked field goal was actually kind of a great coaching decision. Rhett Lashley talked about it after the game where he said, they could have taken a timeout here or there, hope somebody like punched the ball out on a run, or they could present another look on field goal block, knowing they're going to call timeout, and then they come back with what they had worked on all week or over the last 2 weeks, which is Jafari Harvey being an athlete and just jumping over the Duke linemen because they actually just all put their heads down and they don't, that's something they're going to have to adjust to now. But it was just an unreal coaching, decision to trust an athlete to make a play, and he was able to do that. It could have gone the other way. He could have gotten tripped up. He could have not gotten his feet up high enough and it wouldn't have worked, but it did. And then SMU was able to just go out and execute.
Yeah, it obviously when it comes from the middle of the line, like you're watching it, you're like, this is ridiculous. Oh wow, that like what is he doing here? And then you're like, oh well, I guess that. Looking at Pitt this weekend, it's not necessarily an elimination game with Pitt though having Clemson later and SMU probably needing some help to come in their way, even with the three-way tie scenario that could happen with Clemson and Miami and SMU at the top. It feels like one that's pretty huge though for both teams. And like you said, they've played well at home, but it almost feels like there's going to be I'd assume a pretty different energy for this one, as it's not win or go home, but it's pretty close to that.
Yeah, exactly. It's also homecoming too for SMU, so the stands are going to be packed. If the weather especially stays away, it's supposed to rain this weekend. But you also look at Pitt having Eli Holstein banged up. Is he going to play? That's something to monitor as well. But SMU has really played well at home over the last couple of years. Save for really the BYU game, they've been a really good football team. And getting back home and not having to travel on the road, I think they're going to want to put their best foot forward. I know they do. You want to do that in every single game, but I think this game, more important than ever, you got to get back to playing SMU football on the offensive side. Special teams has made some plays, defense has made a ton of plays, and their defensive line is really something where if they can slow down Desmond Reed, that's obviously going to be the key to slowing down this Pitt offense that has shown it can score in bunches. And so that's something where SMU is always going to have their foot on the gas this week. If they can do that and slow down this rushing attack with Desmond Reed, who I believe they have one of the best rushing offenses in the country, but SMU has one of the best run defenses in the entire country. I believe they're 8th nationally in rush defense or yards per carry. So it's a really good defense. It's kind of a best on best matchup in that sense. And Pitt's defense is opportunistic, so SMU has to take care of the football. And if they do that, and I've said this for the last 2 years, you look back on SMU playing Oklahoma last year, TCU, and even if you go back to Rhett's first year with Maryland, they beat themselves in those games. They're a team that, I know this is cliche, and just about every team could say this, but you go back to all of SMU's losses over the last couple of years. Wow, it was a bad interception. It was a missed throw. It was one explosive play given up, and they've been able to find a way to make those plays a lot over the last 2 years. And that's where they've been able to settle into Power 4 football is making those plays that, the previous year against TCU and Oklahoma, they didn't. And this year they've done that, and they're reaping the benefits of that with the 7-1 start. I think this is going to be a game where it's a get right game. They're going to be coming back and, kind of having a bad taste in their mouth from the way that they performed offensively. And I think they're going to feel like it's an opportunity for them to make a statement.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think that, you look at the way that the last game went, and as close as it was to not going their way, it's almost like, well, could this be a blessing in disguise to then kind of refocus you or galvanize you? And coaches always say, like, right, we got to learn lessons while we lost, or while we won instead of losing. And I do feel like it could go that way. I also think Pitt, I'm not trying to pull the who have you beat card, but I do think that Pitt 7-0 is maybe a little deceiving. Like they really should have lost to Cal, in my opinion, if Cal just absolutely didn't bungle the end of the game. And it's hard to pull a lot away from the Syracuse game, because the last time I remember a quarterback having 3 pick sixes, well, I don't, right? Like that's pretty, remarkable. Although I cheer for a team that had 3 turnovers on 3 consecutive plays. So I guess nothing is really too crazy. But I think this is a prove it game for Pitt too. Like I think that narrative does exist for them of like, well, who have you beaten? They're scoring over 40 points a game, but a lot of that comes from early in the year when they're scoring like 70 against, was it Youngstown State or somebody pretty terrible? Like I think, there's a lot that they could prove too. But one thing I do think you think about with Narduzzi coach teams is physicality. And that is something that, I think maybe prior to this year, I don't know that physicality would be the first thing that a lot of people would say about a Lashley coach team. Now this team is certainly one of the more physical ones in the ACC, and they certainly get after it on that defensive front. But just thoughts on the physicality part of the game and maybe the battle up front for the trenches that we'll see this weekend.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And one thing I'll say is going into the Duke game, I said the same thing. Who have they played? And who have they been able to beat? And I think SMU showed that with all the turnovers that a lot of that was on them, but Duke played really, really hard and forced some of their own. And, I think about a couple of the interceptions. I think about the pressure that they got on Kevin. And then there were also some where Kevin just fumbled the ball and you got to hold on to it. And they had a couple other fumbles that could have been lost. And I think about the physicality that Pitt's going to play with. And that is something that I think is going to translate. I have SMU winning by 7, and I just think that they play so well at home. I think they're going to be able to slow down Desmond Reed. They've done a good job of pretty much slowing down the run game every game this year. You don't get to have one of the best rushing defenses in college football without doing that. And if Eli Holstein or Nate Yanel is going to beat SMU, Yarnell is going to beat SMU. I'd be kind of surprised by that. Eli Holstein's a really good quarterback. I have a lot of respect for him. But if that is where they're at, playing against SMU's run defense, that's going to, I think, cause them some problems. And so on the flip side, Duke's defense plays hard and they give it all they can give every single game. And there's something to be said for that. And so if SMU's taking care of themselves this week, getting rested up, getting treatment, and doing all those things now that they're at home, they're not having to leave on a Friday. I think all of that matters for them this week as they gear up for what will be a physical test for them.
Yeah. What is there a matchup in this game that probably gives you the most pause from the SMU perspective or concerns you the most?
I would probably say just what the pressure that SMU allowed from Duke is probably really my main concern if I'm an SMU fan or I'm an SMU coach, because yes, we've seen SMU's offensive line not be the best in terms of pass protection, but with Kevin making the plays that he did last week, both the successful ones and also the ones that you want back, all the turnovers, you've got to find the sweet spot there a little bit more this week. And Pitt's defense can fly around and they can get pressure. And if that's going to be the result, I've said this. I said this on our postgame podcast. I would take a sizable bet to say that SMU doesn't lose the turnover battle 6-0 with 4 or 5 of them coming from Kevin Jennings again. But they need to take care of the ball overall, and they got to get back to forcing some turnovers too. So if those things happen, I feel pretty good about things if I'm an SMU fan watching this one unfold. But now you got to see it happen. You're only as good as your last game in a sense. And Kevin deserves all the accolades he's gotten and praise for this season, but last game was not his best. He moved the offense when he wasn't turning the ball over, which I think is a positive, but you can't do what he did and not, need to show, hey, I got this. I'm back on track.
Yeah. Sounds like you got SMU, you said by about a touchdown. So throughout the week, where can people follow you? Where can they get more insight on the game and just kind of check out your work?
Yeah, check us out on theponyexpress.com. It's homecoming week. Site's never been bigger. We've got a huge staff now helping us out, 4 or 5 guys. So it's a really exciting time to be on 3 and on theponyexpress.com. So come check us out.
Awesome, Billy. I appreciate it, man. Have a good one.
You too. Thanks for having me.